I- I'm gonna, I'll hit the recording button so that we don't lose track of the fact that we made a commitment to record everything.
Yep.
Brian, you're looking sharp today. Good color there, like a little. Well, good morning, everybody. Um,
Good morning,
I'm
right
gonna
on
share my
time.
screen. We're gonna dive right in.
Yay. We
We have
got
a
a lot of
lot.
material today.
Oh my goodness gracious. We 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 have a we do have Blaine and I were looking at it thinking, oh yeah, we got this is meat and potatoes day today. We got a lot of stuff. But it's been kind of that way all week, I think. I think it's felt that way. And Trinity, glad to have you join us. Trinity's joining us from Big Dallas, Texas. So
Good.
down
And
that way.
Laura's coming in here. There we
I'll
go.
let you bring Laura in, and I'm gonna
Yep.
go back and share my screen. All right. And as typical, I'm gonna ask, can everybody can see my screen?
Okay.
Give me a little
Thumbs up.
thumbs up. Thanks, Laura. Good to see you. And welcome to day 4. And today we're going to talk about integrating leadership. Blaine teased a little bit yesterday, and we're going to go pretty quick into getting into the content today. But, as we've come through the week so far, Monday we talked about discovering your why, which is alignment, core values, mission statement. What's your inspiration, motivation, dimensions of leadership? On Tuesday, we're talking about defining a leader. What is a leader? And we'll revisit that definition today. Yesterday we talked about black swans and loved it. And Brian, thank you for your comments yesterday around black swans. When you're in an environment and you're dealing with all of the things around you, having those plans in place. Today we're going to get into integrating, and Blaine was talking about, we're going to talk about context and trust today. And then tomorrow we'll spend our time um, gluing it all together and then heading and talking about the 30-day challenge. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Bartlett, before we cruise into the day today?
No, I think we just get started because we got a lot of material, and I'm going to be very disciplined today in terms of, monitoring my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for
Because
sake of
and I say
transparency.
that because
Yeah.
this particular body of information we're going to be sharing today, uh, we could really go down rabbit holes on this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, in the work that Dolan and I do with our clients, this is where he said he commented meat and potatoes. This is really, I mean, typical coaching client of mine will, the typical engagement's about a year, and at
Yeah.
least initially, and a large chunk of that year is going to be spent on integration, uh, particularly around the topics that we're going to be looking at today: context and trust.
Yep.
So,
Off we go.
just
Everybody up for that? Everybody good?
yep,
Ready?
pop, pop,
Stretch. All right, here we go.
strap
So,
in.
see there, I'll click it. There we
I'll
go.
get Derek. Yeah.
Here we go. Got him. And then I'll let you watch the door until you take over here in a moment, and then I'll watch the door. So we've talked this week about the reference models. We're not going to put up, we did 3 days of having the additional slides around what is the leadership universe and what are the 4 pillars of empowerment. But as we get, and we're not going to do those slides today. We've seen them 3 times, talked about them 3 times. That's enough. But today we're going to spend our time really kind of diving into what happens in these models when we're working with people. What happens with context and trust? How do they work? What things can you expect? Where does resistance occur? And what things can you do when you experience and you want resistance? We'll get into that. And then what things do you do? What tools do you pull from? And what processes, how should you be thinking? So we're going to dive into that. But we are going to pause for a moment, and Mr. Bartlett, if you want to lead us back to this slide,
Yeah.
because this is the linchpin for what we're going to talk about today. It hinges from this definition.
Again, leaders cause movement. At the end of the day, you strip away all of the characteristics that leaders typically exhibit, the personality traits, all that kind of stuff. You strip all that stuff away. And what you've got is somebody that is causing movement in the organization, causing movement in the system that they're participating in. And that system can be a family, it can be a community, it can be a business, whatever it is. But they're causing movement. Their very presence requires the system to pay attention to them. And that can be loud or it can be very quiet, but there's always an adjustment that's going on. So the question here is one around what kind of movement am I causing? What kind of movement is being generated? And that's where the question of leadership comes into play. And leadership is directed at movement. And I use a word in the work that we do that is really actually really relevant to this, and it's elegance. Is my process elegant? And what I mean by elegance, and it's an old word that applied to software coding, when you're writing software code. Elegant code is code that does what it's supposed to do, and it's relatively bug-free. I don't have to go back and clean up after myself. And that's what we're looking to achieve with leadership. Is a highly effective leadership is elegant leadership. It causes minimal unintended consequences. So when we're looking at that through that lens, this definition has particular import. Influencing, moves away from command and control. When you start commanding and controlling people, you generate immediately resistance. Influencing allows people autonomy, and they get to actually move with you with more elegance. Co-creating coordinated movement. Co-creating is ownership transfer. I'm not imposing, I'm inviting. Co-creation. Coordinated movement. We're going into unknown territory. This is unfamiliar to all of us. We don't know really what to do and all of that kind of stuff. We've got some ideas, but how do we dance? We've got different points of view. We've got different preferences. How do we actually coordinate that without losing sight of what we're attempting to produce and create? And then the last piece here has to do with attempting to produce and create that worthy ideal, something that lights me up. And this goes to the distinction between motivation and inspiration. If I've got a worthy ideal in place, it's an inspirational component to what we're trying to do here, and it's individualized. People look at this, they play with this, they understand there's something in this for me that is really important to me. I get to have, do, or be something because we're moving in this direction. And that's where the worthy ideal comes into play here. So we land on these four elements: influence, co-creation, coordinated movement, and worthy ideal. And when we test it, through the mechanism of elegance. And that's what we're going to be looking at today when we're looking at this whole idea of integration. Because integration is the process of getting things moving. So sliding right into this.
Here we go.
Yeah. Context and trust. Everybody, just stop and think about this question real quickly. What is an organization? And I don't care, again, whether it's a family unit or whether it's a large multinational organization. What's an organization? At the end of the day, it's just a collection of people that are in relationship. That's all any organization is, a collection of people that are in relationship. Now, the most obvious piece of that is the interpersonal relationship. My relationship with you, my relationship with my coworkers, my relationship with my boss, whatever it may be. That's the tip of the iceberg on this. People have relationship with values, with work process. They have relationship with goals and objectives. They have relationships with their chairs. They literally have a relationship with their chair. And if the relationship with my chair is bad, I'm going to have a grumpy attitude most of the day. So what we're looking at here is the idea of attending to relational dynamics. And I made the comment yesterday when we were talking about leading through change. The problem with change is not the change itself, typically. The problem with change is the disruption to relationships that the change causes. And if I'm not aware of the relational dynamic, I miss the opportunity to create alignment because I'm focusing on the wrong thing. And this is, again, where most traditional leadership models actually don't work well, because almost exclusively they're looking at vision, values, and strategy, tactics, get things done, move. They don't look at the mindset that's informing the nature of the relationships. And that's where context and trust comes into play. Context generates meaning. It's a meaning generator. Every organization has got resources. The prioritization of those resources, the use of those resources, the meaning of those resources is framed by the context that the leader brings to the table. And this, we're going to go into some conversation about this afternoon, or this session here, around the for the sake of what? Why does the use of this resource matter? For the sake of what are we deploying this thing? For the sake of what? And how does it actually unfold? Mechanisms in this, and this is where trust comes into play, because it takes a while to get this stuff in place. And they have to be able to, I have to trust myself. Can I handle the consequence of what I'm about to do? They have to trust me to a significant degree. They have to trust themselves to be able to say no, or to push back, or to say more information, please. And they then have to trust me that I've got their back. I'm not trying to pull something over on them. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So trust and context kind of go hand in hand here. At the end of the day, it becomes a mechanism for agility and alignment. A good friend of mine, Stephen Covey Jr., wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And when you have high levels of trust in an organization, things can move quickly. If you have low trust, boy, things just grind to a halt, and it gets really expensive. So if you're looking for alignment, context is meaning, trust allows for things to flow. So agility and alignment, empowerment through understanding. Empowerment here is an interesting word, because it means that the team has autonomy. They're the individuals. They are making choices. They don't need me to direct them, which goes back to the nature of influence. So when I have context and trust embedded in what we're doing, empowerment is almost a given. Bridge between vision and execution. We're always going to have a vision. What's the objective? What are we doing, in the next 3 years, the next 2 years, the next 6 months? Context and trust becomes that bridge. Okay. Because again, if you're doing this well, you're moving your organization, moving your people into areas you've never been before, at least to a significant degree. And as I mentioned yesterday, intimacy generates safety, which generates freedom of behavior. So familiarity, intimacy generates safety. Safety gives me permission to actually experiment. This is where innovation and creativity come into play here. So it's a bridge between vision and execution. When I've got context, meaning, and trust in place, people feel as if they can actually experiment a little bit, which literally is what I'm speaking about here. It's a driver of psychological safety. And when people feel safe in any environment, they're much more adept at actually executing. They're much more adept at moving things forward. And that's probably one of the key ways that we assess whether we are being elegant or not. Okay. There's minimal unintended consequences here.
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting, I think, and I love that. So the concept, when I was speaking about it this morning a couple of times, and one of the things is when I talk about trust, I always boil down to trust gives permission for people to try.
Yep.
When they know they're trusted, and we talked about the 4 dynamics of trust before. You have to trust yourself, then you have to trust the individual. The individual has to trust themselves, or the team, or the leader, and then they have to trust you. And people can smell it on you if that doesn't work. They know there's a vibrational state. Derek, yesterday we talked about vibrational states. You feel it, you're not on that same wavelength, right? So it's a very similar thing. So these we're going to spend some time talking a little bit more about these in depth, but it does set that framework for context, the value of context, and trust, what that means.
So when you put all of this together, you end up with kind of a flow state.
And good segue. And you're all over here on this
screen. You think we knew what we were doing here?
I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing over here. So it's there. I'm going to disclaim this slide a little bit. We talk about reference models, and in this slide, this is not a. We're going to talk about these steps, these places where you and your team are kind of through this flow. But I don't want us thinking about this from the kind of the rote approach of first I do vision, and then I do goals, and then I do strategy, and then I do plan, and then I do tactics, and then I do measure, because to the Blaine's point, or in our conversation, really all of this happens in flow. So you may be doing vision and plan. If it's part of the conversation, you may be doing goals and there's a blend to all of this as this conversation occurs. But we broke these into smaller pieces deliberately with the intention of being able to give us a place marker to talk about when you're in kind of this point where you're building your vision. Here are things that here's what will happen from a resistance perspective, could happen. And here are things that you do as a leader from a context, trust, mindset, flow perspective to work with your team kind of through this arc. And it really is circular. As leaders, we know, and business owners or coaching other businesses, we do all of these things kind of all the time. We're always thinking about vision and strategy and am I measuring properly? And we're looking at these. So that's really the sake of our intention, is not to go away. And we're not going to teach you how to build vision and build goals and what's smart and OKRs and KPIs and blah, 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 all that stuff. That's not what our intention is. But it really is just to talk about what happens during this flow.
Yeah. And the background, and you don't see that on this slide, but the background of all of this is mindset. The background of all of this is mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Mindset informs how I develop my vision, and it's about possibilities. And mindset will either constrain or expand. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mentioned yesterday the use of the imagination. Um, so mindset informs how I actually begin to set some of this stuff up. It informs how I begin to work with some of the stuff that comes into play. In the next body of information you're going to get here, mindset will inform how we deal with resistance. I mean, all of these things will start to come into play here. So the idea here is, when we're looking through this, and this is one of the things that when we put this together here, and Dolan mentioned this, we're looking at through a lens of discernment here. There are discrete pieces, but it's
Yeah.
all part of a whole. When we start noticing what we're noticing, when we start noticing what we're squirrel, I mean, where did my attention go? Where did our people's attention go? Okay, it's kind of like, whoa, come back here. Let's get ourselves refocused again, because mindset will hijack things very quickly if we're not paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
very
that's what
much
we
so.
want to do. We want to, yeah. In the background of all of this is always this: what's the mindset that's in play?
Right. All right. So let's talk about the very first part, which is resistance. Now, as we open a conversation around resistance, the kind of the very first thing that I want to presence with everybody is we want resistance. Resistance represents change. Change creates friction. Friction creates heat. Heat creates light. But Blaine, well, and I won't use the colloquialism that Blaine and I use just because it had a portion of the anatomy associated with it. We will tell you that when resistance is occurring, this is an important conversation, because as a leader, one of the things that you want to do is to be able to recognize, where might I face resistance? Because resistance is going to occur, because the beautiful thing about being a leader is there's other people involved.
Mhm.
And they're going to be in a different state of mind depending upon many different aspects in their life. So when resistance occurs, we want resistance to occur. If you don't think about resistance and contemplate what kinds of resistance you may face and what you do with your mindset as the leader and how you take action, it will bite you. To be very pragmatic about it. It will come back, and it will find ways to haunt you. That's not exactly the way Blaine and I said it earlier. However, for the sake of the audience today, we won't use those words. So, Blaine, you want to let's talk a little bit about resistance, and then we'll get into the vision side of it.
Yeah. Um, Re- Nolan said you want to have resistance. You also want to be able to manage it effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't want World War III, unleashed on your organization. Okay. The idea of resistance, again, it's another metaphor here would be friction. Yeah, it creates heat
Yep.
and it generates light. So, done well, you can use your skills as a leader to say, you seem to be hesitant right now. What's going on with you? What part of this did not land well with you? So you want to be in a position of actually surfacing that subliminal resistance that isn't being articulated. And they may not know that they're in resistance around this. They just, kind of back up a little bit
Yeah.
and it's unconscious. So the more you can make the unconscious conscious, make the hidden visible, now you can work with it. Now you can work with it. And they may have a legitimate, and they oftentimes will have a legitimate, reason for balking, for backing up just a moment. I hadn't thought about that. Let's take a look at that. Shedding light. Yeah. The heat generates, or the resistance generates heat. We can, clean the oven a little bit here. You know, what will fall off when we start examining this stuff. So you want to be able to manage that. And part of the skill set of a highly effective leader is they know how to surface it and they know how to direct it. And that's what we're working with. And they direct it towards that worthy ideal. They direct it towards the for the sake of what that we're trying to make this happen. That, is always in play here. So when we're setting vision, yeah, lack of clarity. I mean, and this is not exhaustive. Trust
No.
me, this is not exhaustive in any way, shape, or form. But some of the
No.
key things that you can, anticipate might likely occur is team members may resist if the vision is not clearly communicated or if it feels abstract and unattainable. It's too far out there. It doesn't have enough concreteness around it that they can actually get their fingers into it. Yeah. And this is where for the sake of what? Why is it important to me? An interesting story here. When I started doing work with Nokia back in 1994, 95, um, and I won't go into the whole history on this, but Nokia had an interesting vision. And I literally asked, what's the vision? Because I was developing their leadership platform for the next, literally the next 10 years. And I ended up working with them for 12. But I said, what's your vision? And they said, oh, very simple. Vision 2000. No, no, what's your vision? No, that's it. Vision 2000. Well, what does that mean? And they went, exactly. What does that mean? What they did, now this was abstract in the extreme, but what it made room for was for people to define for themselves what it meant for them within the framework, within the context of their department, their division, their area of responsibility. And it was linked to something that they had already articulated, which was a strategic initiative. So it was objectively linked to that. But the vision itself made room for people to say, to lean in and go, what? See, what's important about vision is not what it is. What's important about vision is what it does. Yeah, it becomes a mechanism to create movement. So if there's lack of clarity, see, and with the Nokia group, they anticipated that people would have questions, which is what they wanted. That's exactly what they wanted. Questions are indicative that people are engaged. That's what's going on here. They were engaged. So the other piece around vision, particularly if it's bold and it's out there, this is the whole notion of relationship. Yeah. What relationships are being perturbed. So these are the two primary
No.
areas where you're going to bump into some walls, some, obstacles potentially. When you start setting goals, when you start getting granular. Golan, you've got this one.
Yeah, thank you. So similarly, when we're setting goals, there are, the team may feel they may get frustrated, right? Because from their view, it feels this is an overwhelming goal. I feel it's way too ambitious. I don't know how I'm going to get there. There's no clarity. And because there's no, without with the clear pathway means there's a disconnect between the reason, the for the sake of what. And we're going to talk about for the sake of what in a little bit, but we'll presence that concept now. Without clarity, right? Clarity creates confidence. Without clarity, with no clear pathways, they're frustrated in their apathy because in our mind, we begin to think about, well, how am I going to do it? And if I can't get there, then the meteors are going to hit the planet, and if the meteors hit the planet, then there's going to be a new ocean, and if there's new oceans, I got to learn how to swim, and I don't have time to learn how to swim, and I don't even own a wetsuit or a snorkel and a mask, and they tend to spin, and as they spin, they get more granular, more granular, more granular, and the frustration and apathy rises up, creating a disconnect there. And they may see it if they don't understand their role, which is the for the sake of what, this is irrelevant. Irrelevant, is that the right word? I'm trying to be irrelevant. English is the second language to me, so I'm figuring it out. I'm originally from Alabama, so I speak Alabama fluently. But resistance, when you're in that mode, they don't see what's my role in this. What am I contributing? What do I do so that I know I'm moving the needle towards success? So they're gonna perceive this as irrelevant, to use irrelevant is the word I'm seeking for. And because of that, they tend to pass it off with a statement. Oh, I've heard this before. This is going to pass, and therefore I'm just going to keep doing what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
I'm not going to make the change, and I'm not going to try because Andy said we're going to blah, 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 blah. This too shall pass.
That's that maintenance cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Mr. Bartlett,
Yeah,
strategy?
and then when we've got a vision, we've got goals within that vision. Now we say, how do we get there? How do we get there? That's where strategy comes into play here. And people have different ideas about pathways. Yeah. And oftentimes it's really steeped in past experience. This is the mindset, bogeyman. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, we've done it this way before. Let's do it that way again. Okay. So our past becomes a mechanism by which we try to create the future. Problem with that is the future may require a completely different set of fill in the blank directions, skills, resources, whatever it might be. So the resistance here looks like we've done it this way before. I know how to do this. Yeah. So an immediate, here's the way we do this, sort of a thing. You want to stop that truck before it gets away from you. That runaway train. Back up a little bit for the sake of what? And are there more than, what are some other alternative strategies that we haven't considered before? Those sorts of things start to come into play here.
Yeah.
Now, here's a real interesting notion. Whenever a problem occurs, and oftentimes strategy conversations are at least initially formulated around, again, the problem is we don't know how to get there. So let's look at this. So when we start that conversation, the default is to look to the past. We've got a whole, I mean, and it's legitimate. We've got a whole grab bag of experiences and skills that we've used before. And so we go to these grab bags and we start holding up these past experiences and hold them up against this problem that we've got and go, yep, that one will solve the problem. It solved the problem before.
Hmm.
Here's the challenge. Every time I introduce a solution to a problem, I introduce back into the system something that will cause a new problem. Now, so just stop and think about that for a minute. The moment I solve a problem with something that I've used before, I introduce back into the system some of the elements that caused that problem to begin with. And this, you'll see this over and over and over again. We've seen, yeah, we got a problem with revenue again. Well, did we have a problem with revenue a year ago? Yeah. And how did you solve it? Well, we did it this way. Are you going to do that again? Yeah, we're going to do that again. Well, I'll guarantee you in another year, you're going to have a problem with revenue because nothing new has been introduced into the system.
Right.
Part of the challenge from a leadership perspective is you don't want to be seen as a problem solver. You want to appear as a problem creator. Now, when I say a problem creator, I'm talking about I want to anticipate problems I've never experienced before because it's an indication that we are now moving into a growth cycle. We're now learning new ways to do things in service of achieving that worthy ideal. Now, this is almost a paradox. It's kind of like, what are you talking about? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You want to be creating new problems for your organization that it's never experienced before. And it's intentional. And it's in service of that for this that worthy ideal, that for the sake of what?
Yeah.
You will get resistance around that. I will guarantee it. Okay. Because people have a pet, a pet modality. This is the way we've done it before. Let's do that. So that's why collaborative strategy comes into play here. Okay. This is the co-creation area. This is what you want to be able to co-create.
We'll go on. So when you kind of in world there's we'll talk a little bit more about we'll go quickly through some visioning around solutions around these, but as you're facing things like planning, right? Plans plans one of the pieces of resistance is if you're not co-creating, remember in that word co-creating coordinated movement. When you're co-creating movement with your team, the challenges around rigidity diminish. If you are in a command and control stance, then the team views those plans as this is rote, this is what I'm doing. And they feel as if, but you don't understand my job. You don't know what I do. You don't, this is really hard because I have, let me tell you and you end up in a conference, let me tell you what I do for a living. So when you're the with missing that piece around co-creating, with owning the solution and the plan to accomplish that, it's viewed as inflexible. And same thing with ambiguity, because if they are not involved with it and they aren't a component of the conversation around accountability, which includes detail. What am I doing? By when? Who owns it? There's an agreement and a commitment, knowing that it's a group of people in a collective relationship. As a leader, that's what we're responsible for. There has to be a collective agreement on what we're going to do. Who's responsible? In my house, I'm responsible for taking out the trash. I wash the dishes. I don't know why it works that way, but I wash the dishes. Apparently, that's the job I have now as I've gotten older. But we have these things that we're responsible for. We're responsible to and for each other. So part ambiguity becomes part of it because there was a missing piece in. So when you see that with your team, that's likely a symptom of not co-creating, but being in a command and control mindset. They're confused. And when we're confused and we're apathetic, we procrastinate because we don't want to tell you we don't know what we're doing. I'd rather do other things.
Which moves us
Or,
into other things, tactics.
yeah. Speaking of other
There,
things.
yeah, there's a distinction and a major distinction to be made between the activity of leadership and the activity of management. Management is a utilization and the deployment of resources in order to produce a specific result. And managers get paid to produce a result. Leaders get paid to produce a result as well, but it's a different animal. Yeah, the result that leaders are charged with here is defining the context, defining the meaning frame such that management can now execute effectively, moving possibility into probability, probability into results. That handoff between leadership and management is the crucial piece here. So you're going to wear both hats. There's no question about that. But what you want to be able to do is just notice that when resistance occurs in the execution phase, it's going to oftentimes be a consequence of you wanting to micromanage because, and this is where trust comes into play. If I just hand it off to them, what if they don't do it the way I did?
Oh,
What
yeah.
if they screw up? Okay. Trust. Trust literally in this context is I can handle the consequence of the handoff. I can handle whatever might occur. If it goes sideways, I can handle the blowback. I can work with them. So it's a self-trust that comes into play here that gives you the freedom to hand it off so that they can actually execute in a way that's appropriate for them to execute. So the other piece of this is lack of understanding. When I delegate, when I hand it off, is there clarity about the for the sake of what? Is there, and there's a whole model, communication model that begins to directly address that. We don't manage to results, we manage to commitments. And there's a chain of commitments that people, promise when they say yes to something. So when I promised, yes, I will deliver this to you by 5 o'clock at the tomorrow, I've got to go to somebody else to say, okay, I need this, I need that. Do you promise to get it to me by 2 o'clock so that I can, and they promise, and they have to go someplace else. So there's a chain of commitments that's in any result structure. There's a chain of commitments that's in play. Part of the leadership role is understanding what that chain looks like so that you can begin to fail safe it. Okay. And that's, understanding, becomes a very interesting piece on this, because if you understand that well, then you can make appropriate requests, that can allow people the freedom to execute well without, the sword of Damocles hanging over their head. And that also leads to this next piece where measures come into play. Dolan?
Yeah, so in measures, and I'm going to go quickly so we can talk a little bit about the next couple of slides and just review some other concepts and ideas. But when measures, ultimately, I think everybody's probably comfortable with the name Peter Drucker. There's an old adage out there around things that measuring things, right? Without his exact quote just eluded me. I had it 2 seconds ago, but the bubble popped. So with Peter Drucker, we talk about measurement, and people sometimes are fearful of being held accountable. And one of the key words in here is that it leads to punitive actions. If I'm missing the mark, and this means trust is broken. If we go back to that corner pillar with trust, if I'm afraid of a punitive action, then I'm also afraid that you don't trust me. And because I know you don't trust me, I know you don't have my back, right? So one of the things that happens is people become afraid of that. And that's a concept around if we don't have solid trust built with those individuals, and there's a commitment on their part to accomplish the outcome, right? It's a series of commitments. Then they feel like they're being exposed for underperforming. They're afraid to say, "Hey, I need help." They're afraid to say, "Hey, I don't understand." And if they don't feel that the measures are in alignment with their progress or outcome that they're working for, the measures aren't going to be meaningful. And one of three things is going to happen. They're either not going to do it because they make a decision. Oh, there's my thumb. They make a decision. I am not going to do it, or they don't do it because they don't understand it. So there's lack of clarity, or they don't do it because they don't have the skill for it. And skills you can teach. So there's one of three things going on in that particular moment in time. They're not accomplishing their measures. They've made the decision, I'm not doing it. I'm going to do something else. This too shall pass. I don't have the skills, or I'm afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, and just to kind of capstone on that piece, if the quality of anybody's yes is predicated on their ability and willingness to say no.
Yes. No.
No. No, I'll say it again. The quality of a yes is dependent on their ability and their willingness to say no to you. That's where all of a sudden we got a little bit of resistance. Great. Let's shed some light on this. Why are you backing up? Do they feel safe to say no? If they do, then through the course of the conversation, can move towards a high quality yes that you can count on. That's how you begin to break that through. Okay. So
Yeah.
now these are the areas of tip. I mean, again, tip of the iceberg. They're not comprehensive at all. but it gives you some idea that in any one of these phases, there will be some resistance likely to occur. And these are the ones that, typically will show up, at least initially. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the flip side of this. As Dolan said, we're not going to go into vision development or any of that other things.
No.
But when you start looking at, what you're doing as a leader from a vision perspective, yeah, it's linked to a meaningful I am. Okay. And by I am, I'm talking about that state inside you that's, lights up when something is present. This I am looks for expression. It looks for an invitation to come out. And that's what we want to align with. Yeah, for ourselves personally as a leader, but also we want to make it possible for our people to align with that within themselves. If I've got a 20-person organization, I will have 20 different interpretations of my vision. I will guarantee it. 20 different interpretations. What's the aligning mechanism? That aligning mechanism is a question. If we're able to do this, what does it make possible for you? The aligning question. What's it make possible for you? Now, we're doing this because it makes this possible for the company, but what does it make possible for you? People land on that, and now you've got 20 individuals that are passionate about what they're doing because it's important to them and it contributes to this outcome that you want to achieve, this worthy ideal that you're striving for. So that's what you're working towards here when you're developing a compelling vision.
And goals, just in brief, right? So one of the questions, and we'll talk about a decision on today, we're going to get into for the sake of what kind of beyond this, and then we're going to give you a kind of a decision-making process that you can apply to your organization, to your teams as you're thinking through things and making a decision. But with goals, it's important, right? We talked about context and trust. The goal has to align with the broader context. It's very important. If you're out of alignment, and we'll deal more with this in a couple of slides. If you're out of alignment, then obviously there's an impact to your organization. So as a leader, it is one of the questions you're going to ask yourself is, and do I continue to be in alignment? Remember on Monday we talked about our alignment, our core value, what our inspiration is, what our motivation is, what aligns. Are you in alignment with your company's mission statement? Are you in alignment? So the goal itself must be in alignment, and it starts with being in alignment with you. And then the vision, it's hard. It's kind of like Blaine talked about 2000, right? This is our goal. But one of the goals in a previous organization was we're going to have 1 billion people watching a YouTube channel. Well, that's cool. What is that? So 1 billion it's hard to grow. What about the first 100? So how is the goal put into a modality or a vision so that there is a vision towards the broad reach, but how does it become tangible? So when I'm thinking about my progress towards that outcome, what does that look like? And then what's that time frame? All good goals have good time frames because that links into our commitment, that relationship, the responsibility of the people we have custody of, and that organization built on relationships. Strategy.
Yeah, and then when you're working with a strategy. Now, I'm noticing this slide, Dolan. This piece should have gone on the resistance.
Oh yeah,
slide.
Well,
yeah.
all right.
Our cut and paste didn't work well here.
It's a typo on this slide.
So if you jump back to I think slide 14, just go up 2 or 3 or 2, whatever it is.
To this one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Strategy. Oh yeah, it was backwards.
When you're working with strategy here, I mean, the ideal is you're leveraging awareness. Yeah. And again, the conflict, the resistance is people have got their own mindsets about how things are supposed to be done. So you want to bring that awareness to the table. Okay. Yeah, that worked before. What else can we look at? So
Right.
Tell me why that's important to you now. It was important to us last week, but why is it important now to what we're trying to achieve? So in the course of that conversation, you develop a collaborative strategy. You collaborate to create that strategy. So that's the work that gets done at the strategy level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll go on. So apologies for the typo. It's not bad for a 300 slide deck. We got 200 slides we got to go through tomorrow, so get ready. But as we're going through it, in planning again, and I'm going to go relatively quickly because I want to really get into the for the sake of what,
Go for
which encompasses all of these things.
it.
But this goes back to, as we saw the symptom of how people may feel from a resistance perspective. But engage your team in co-creating, engaging your team in co-creating. Look, as leaders and as folks with the custody of other people that we're in a relationship with, co-creating is hard to do. It is, I would like to tell you it's an easy thing to do, but when you're co-creating and you're doing it with the right intent and the right authenticity, then it automatically creates alignment and buy-in. And with alignment and buy-in, you attain velocity and you move towards your outcome. And they understand, therefore, the sake of the what's in it for me as you're moving forward. So becoming comfortable with co-creating is in and to itself its own lesson, and moving away from command and control kind of an approach.
Yep. And
And
then the tactics, that's
go
where,
ahead.
execution happens with tactics. In the best laid plans of mice and men, just throw them out the window. Once you've got your plan. And what we're looking at here is flexibility. So you do your best on the front end when you're planning and you're looking at, okay, how do we deploy these resources, whether it's people or, tangible resources, like money or, whatever it might be. But stuff happens. I mean, stuff happens. The ability to be able to pivot is what you're looking at here. And this is where context becomes really important. That for the sake of what that we're going to look at here in just a moment here, we can pivot. There's innumerable ways that we can go about achieving this result. The one we landed on, we thought was the best. Well, okay, now it looks like that's not going to be something we can use. Let's be flexible here. And the key here is not to have people become dispirited because the obstacle
Mhm.
appeared. The obstacle, in Stoic philosophy, if you study Stoicism, the obstacle is the way. The problem becomes the way. If you didn't encounter a problem, you're not. Oh, let me say that a different way. The problem is part of the path.
There you go.
The
Yeah.
problem is part of the path. If you weren't on the path, that problem wouldn't appear. So rather than going, oh my God, this is horrible, it's kind of like, wow, this is kind of cool. How do we actually use this to move ourselves forward? And this is where you start looking at different ways of engaging. This is where growth in the organization happens. You start developing new skills, new ways of looking, new ways of engaging, new ways of organizing. This obstacle becomes a mechanism that is utilized. And that's what tactics are about here when you're looking at really empowering people to, hey, you're close to this. Let us know how you're going to work with this. It's not going to stop us, but how do
Right.
we use this to move ourselves forward? That kind of a conversation is a possibility-based conversation, which is what leadership is steeped in. Leadership is about possibility.
Yeah. And finally, measures. And we had a conversation previously about measures, but this restates it in a little bit of a different way. But again, we're seeking trust and alignment, and measures give us a framework to create communication and to make it transparent so that together we are collaborating. Part of co-creating is co-collaborating. Where are we in the path? How are we doing in the path? What could we do better? What things can we change so that we are moving forward? And even more importantly, because trust is the cornerstone of it, is it empowers people. It creates autonomy so that people can move forward. They know. I had a conversation this morning with an executive, and we talked about my favorite candy bar in the world, which is a Three Musketeers. Anybody ever eat a Three Musketeers? And when you
Yeah.
peel the wrapper off of Three Musketeers, it's chocolate, and it's got this it's beautiful. It's got this wave on the top of it. It looks Somebody handmade this candy bar for me. And then when you break it open, it's got this chewy nougat in the middle, kind of this creamy stuff in there, and that's good. And what I'm looking for as a leader is I'm looking for that wrapper and that candy bar and that beautiful chocolate over the top of it. The autonomy was created by that stuff in the middle. that got me to the outcome by creating a candy bar that I really love and it looks gorgeous and it tastes really good and I can freeze it and eat it on a hot day. It's amazing. Not to, not to hawk Three Musketeers, but we'll go on. But it gives people that's the purpose of autonomy, is that chewy nougat that allows them to move forward with progress and bring forward a solution that is elegant and with ease to accomplish an outcome. And that's what autonomy is really built on. Now, this is a lot today.
Yeah.
So
This is a
I'm gonna
fire
invite
hose,
everybody
guys.
just do this for just a second. Shake your. And matter of fact, Blaine, we discovered. Let's see if it'll work. Ready? Will it work?
It should.
Oh, we had
It's
it
not.
when Blaine and I did this earlier. We had explosions
Oh,
and
there you
fire.
go. You got to have
Well,
your
there it
thumbs up
is.
in
You
the
got
air.
yours. Oh, two thumbs. There we go. There we go. Explosions. Okay, we're good. So. So we're learning new things, being rookie presenters, we're figuring all this stuff out. Um, we're gonna have a conversation about we've teased this term for the sake of what, and we're gonna sort of shift gears and talk about that. And then from for the sake of what, we'll talk a little bit about a decision-making mode that you can experiment with in your organizations or with the teams and or clients that you're working with. And we'll go into the worksheet and into our breakout. So I'm being cognizant of time. Blaine, do you want to talk a little about it for the sake of what, and I'll tackle it inside of the decision making.
Yeah, I'll actually use this question. Brian just put a question in the chat area. Why is
Oh, let me
leadership
look.
about possibilities? That's
Ah,
that's Brian. I love a ringer in the group here.
good question,
That
Brian.
just kind of
Good. Yeah, great
sets me up
job.
for things here. It's about possibilities because this for the sake of what is always, the nature of for the sake of what is about what personally matters. We've got a vision. Wonderful. For the sake of what? For the sake of what? What does it make possible? What does it make possible for me? What does it make possible for my organization? Like, I'll go back to Nokia. Vision 2000. Okay, that's the vision. What does it make possible? That question got answered individually by people in the organization. And it's that possibility that moves people because it's inspiring. It's inspiring. It's that for the sake of what? It locks me into something that I care about. I personally care about. The challenge from a leadership point of view is to be able to align that with the organization's goals, objectives, and the organization's ultimate vision. Again, if you've got 20 people, you're going to have 20 different interpretations of this vision. If you can land on for the sake of what, that allows for an organizing mechanism that can coalesce these different pieces into a targeted direction. And the idea of possibility, think of it in terms of a magnet. When you get, everything lined up, all of a sudden you've got a magnet that is not only going, aligned in a directional flow, but magnets attract. Magnets attract things. And you start, when you're aligned, you start attracting things to the organization, to the individuals that are in service of that worthy ideal. The challenge that we run into from a leadership perspective is people want to know how to do things. And that's where we get in trouble because we pull the trigger on how far too soon. And you'll hear people say, well, how do we do that? And you don't know how. And then people go and they default back to what they've always known. When you have alignment around for the sake of what, individually, for the sake of what, how becomes not something we're concerned with necessarily. Now, the how is important. There's no question about that. We've got to actually execute. But we don't want to be preoccupied with a how way too soon in the process. Leaders want to be able to create alignment. That alignment creates momentum, and it also serves as an attractor. It's a magnetic force. That's what we're looking at here. It's a prioritization filter. We begin to look at things and in a different way, and then different hows begin to appear, different ways of both thinking and generating action begin to appear. That's what we're looking at. Brian, go ahead.
Let me see. Yes, thank you so much. That question was from Bella, but she had sent it to me directly. But I also wanted to ask another question. In Uganda, most of the institutions use projects and products, but the end goal is usually money. They are trying to see how much money can I raise.
Yeah.
So, and when we're discussing here, you actually brought it to my attention that money is simply a relationship to fulfill vision. And I just needed you to expound on that, because now money becomes an obstacle and a stumbling block for most of the projects that we want to achieve, because we look at it as the end product. Once we're able to do this and get this so much money, then we will have achieved our goal. And yet, in this leadership training, I'm learning that it's simply a tool, but there's a bigger goal. And I just wanted you to give your mindset on that. It was very opening. Yeah.
That's a great question. And I'll put it in a context. If we get the money, then we can have what we say we want.
Yep.
Completely backwards. Completely backwards. When I get aligned, and I mean emotionally engaged with the what is it that I want?
Yeah.
Now I'm not dependent on external I'm gonna say this categorically, but then we can kind of unbundle that. I am not a victim of my need for external resources in order to manifest this ideal. If then I can't get this until I have that, all of a sudden I feel hamstrung. Yeah. And my whole world now becomes focused on how do I get that, and I lose focus on for the sake of what? I lose focus on that ideal. And as a consequence of that, I lose creativity. Innovation begins to be shortchanged. All of those sorts of things. If I can keep, money, time, and primarily money and time are the two major obstacles that people have in organizations for why they can't get something. Okay. And they get fixated on the money or the time. How do I generate more money? How do I generate more time? Or how do I create more relationships so that I can do that? And it's that if-then dynamic. I can't do it until I have that. Well, yes, you can do it. There are organizations that actually do that without the money, at least initially. Now, the money eventually comes. So it depends, you notice where your attention goes. Energy follows attention, not intention. Energy follows attention. I can't do this until I have the money. Well, all of a sudden now all of my energy goes towards the generation of money, and I lose the focus on for the sake of what? Chad, how about you?
Two things. One, I had a question. The second thing, I also want to address this actual point, because one of the things that we have found, like for example, with our tiny home company, is everybody's focusing on, if we have this money, that's the answer that will solve all the problems. And the reality is that we find that just throwing money at it doesn't solve the underlying issues. Because those issues that were there in how they're handling the money and got them there to begin with are still going to be there when the money shows up.
Right.
And so, that's something we're actually working on right now, is how to get everybody in alignment so that when the money does come in, that it's used, appropriately and efficiently to actually get to the vision, right, and to the goal. So that's one thing that's, I think, really important, because we see that all the time. People saying that's the answer. That's the answer. Well, all we need is money. All we need is money. So, but the other question I had, is because when you said about the magnet and alignment and flow, it hit something for me in terms of how much of alignment do you actually have to get? Because there's a system in nature called a phase transition, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So when 1% of a lead bar gets in alignment, that creates the magnet, right?
Yeah.
There's a phase
Critical
transition.
mass.
Yeah, it becomes magnetized, right?
Yeah.
And so as in crystals, it actually is on consciousness too. We found that, with cities learning to meditate, and it actually changes the structure of what's happening in the world. So is that the same in corporate? Do we really need to just have a certain percentage really in alignment to bring the rest, in? So that was my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some examples of that. We can probably talk offline about it. I'm in the interest of our
Yeah.
time here today. You're not going to
We-
get full 100% alignment. That's not the objective. You want to have a critical mass. And literally that critical mass will cause the phase transition. All of a sudden the organization moves from we can't to wow, we can. And it's that phase transition occurs with a critical mass. Now, what is that number? It's hard to say, but it's not 50%. I'll tell you that. It is not 50%. It's
Smaller.
actually less than 50%.
Yeah. And that's a great question, great point, Chet. And sorry, Bella, we'll get to you in just a second. In the next point, we're going to talk about a decision-making pinwheel. And one of the things that we talk about in there is the percentage of information you need to be able to call the ball and make a decision. And it's similar to your question, Chad, about alignment. I'll add one little demonstration, just a practical thing to support your thinking, Chad, about money. Years ago, slightly gray hair, Dolan White, before I turned completely gray hair. One of my clients that I was coaching with was a guy named Paul Orfala. Paul Orfala was a guy we knew Paul as Kinko. For those who remember Kinko's, those who are old, and for those of you young people like Ryan Harris, Kinko's was a company where you could go to make copies and do all kinds of things. It was born out of the University of California, Santa Barbara. A lot of things came out of Kinko's. Paul was my client, and we were in a meeting specifically, and one of the immovable objects in the meeting was Paul himself. And his stance was, if I throw enough money at it, I will solve the problem, which drove Kinko's to bankruptcy and an acquisition by FedEx.
Mm-hmm. Too much money. I would rather work with a company that's undercapitalized than one that's overcapitalized. I really would.
Yeah.
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 Bella, you had a question before we move on?
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think that Chess really covered it. I just had, during what you talked about earlier, I was thinking about the Gallup approach about our strength could be a part of it, but I think, Blaine, that you answer it, that it's not at all 50% of our alignment. I think that's the answer, so it's okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Dolan, let's move.
Okay. We're just to set some expectations for everybody. If I tap my watch and it'll work, it's 10:05. It is, from a timetable perspective, it is unlikely that we will move into breakouts today for 10 minutes or so, just so we can get an exercise in front of you, and we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. But I want to spend a couple of minutes, and as you know, we talked about the flow with strategy, goals, vision, and all of the arc and the circle, and what you may face in resistance and what you may face from and symptoms and how you may address them as leader. One thing that I did want to share with you, and this is in particularly important because of the for the sake of what. Remember, from for the sake of what, to align decisions and visions and values. And so when you're making decisions within the body of your business or in your life or with coaching other clients or whatever you're doing, whatever whether it's vocation or personal, start with for the sake of what? For the sake of what? So that I am in alignment. The second question then is this decision, this thing that I am seeking, either in my life or in my career or with this client or in my business, am I remaining in alignment with my mission and core values? And remember on day one, we talked about mission and core values. Your mission, your core values are your immovable principles. And your mission is what you do. That's the purpose of your business or the purpose of the decision. And then this decision, how does it contribute? The question becomes, if I make this decision, what is it? What am I looking for? How does it contribute? What's the cost? What's the cost can be broken into a couple of components, which can be, Blaine talked about money and time. That's like I always focus on kind of three domains: people, time, and money. What's the impact? And on the people side, am I breaking some of those? Remember, am I creating friction? And if I'm creating friction or resistance, what does that look like? So what's the cost? And Chad, to your point around alignment with, at that point, it is as a component in that number 4 is that thought around alignment with my team. That's a people cost, and my team is in alignment.
Right.
Number 5 is the amount of information. If we wait to have 100% of the information that we need in order to make a decision, the decision has passed us. The opportunity is gone. And that's a matter of fact, it was fun because I listened to a interview with this Jeff Bezos guy I talked about yesterday. And one of the things he talked about, and in his world, it's actually 75%. At about the 75% mark, we call the decision. And it's based on intuition, gut, knowledge, experience, data. There's other components that come into that from a data thing. And kind of the last part of this pinwheel is if I say yes, if we say yes or no, what's the opportunity cost? And the reason why that's important is as you're coming through this is at point 6, you're asking yourself a question. We can if we don't do this activity, or we can if we do this next step, so that you begin to look at what is it that I have to give up to make this decision. If I'm not in alignment in number 2, and there's times you're going to make a decision that may not be in alignment with your core values for a specific reason. What's the cost? So it gives you that opportunity to stop with, if we say yes or no, what's my cost? We can if. And if you answer all of those questions, it will give you your decision relatively quickly, either in a panel or together. And actually, as a leader, one of the things that we have as leaders is to make decisions within a reasonable time frame. One of the things that I had a boss for years and years in the software industry as a young pup, and we would have a 2-hour meeting, and at the end of the 2-hour meeting, he goes, "Okay, let's go home and sleep on it." This avoids the let's go home and sleep on it scenario when you're thinking through it, which creates that tension and frustration and wondering why I just lost 2 hours of my life to a meeting I'll never get back. So it helps you through that process.
Yeah.
Blaine?
Yeah. I mean, just this decisions. I'm gonna put these things in order. We got the for the sake of what? You keep that, kind of, that's the background. Yeah. For the sake of what? For the sake of what? Decisions. Usually I come to a fork in the road and I have to decide which fork to take. Which path do I go down? Each path now gets populated by a series of choices. And those are the executional pieces.
Yep.
So one of the things that begins to happen in many organizations is we come to that fork in the road and all we see are the choices in front of us, and we haven't taken the time to really vet the decision about which pathway do we take. The decision is the pathway. That's the pathway. We make a decision about the pathway. That begins to inform, and that's the context. That begins to now inform the relevance of the choices. Okay, all of these other choices will fall by the wayside. And to point number 6 here, we make that decision clear. These other choices, irrelevant. Okay, they may be really pretty, they're nice, flashy trinkets, but they're not relevant. This is the decision we've made. This is the pathway we're going down. And these are the choices that are, kind of embedded in that pathway. So it helps to clarify. It provides clarity for people, and it begins to reduce the complexity that I'm dealing with. Okay. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this. And that's a leadership function.
Whew, that's a lot today.
Yeah. Folks, this has been a fire hose today. Yeah. This, we want to just acknowledge that there's been a lot of stuff, and we don't know how to really truncate, to kind of pare this down a little bit. We've wrestled with this a little bit. I mean, and like I said right at the very beginning this morning, this is the body of our work. When we get to working with clients, this is where the deep diving occurs. This is where we really wrestle. So you've gotten, I mean, we lifted the cover up, but when we lifted the cover, it's kind of like, oh my God, look at all that stuff. So we want to give you a worksheet here. We're not going to have time, I don't think, to go into the breakout sessions.
No, we are at 12 minutes after the hour. So I'll share the worksheet. Go ahead,
yeah,
buddy.
we'll put this worksheet in the chat area.
Yeah, it's there.
But this is something that can help kind of make sense of this fire hose today. Okay, you can actually put some of the stuff we've been looking at in these 8 different categorical boxes. What's the primary purpose of your vision? That's kind of it begins to help you identify the for the sake of what. So you start with what's the primary purpose, the why, and then for the sake of why, for the sake of what is that why important? What does that why make possible? Then what are some of the goals and objectives that we might set in that area? And land on one. Okay, just land on one. But again, not a deep dive here. Why is this? Again, why is this goal important to the organization? What does it make possible? How will achieving the goal impact the organization and stakeholders? So you start looking at the relational dynamic. How, what's the impact? Plot upside and downside. What relationships are going to be perturbed? Okay. What mechanisms will ensure individuals and teams stay accountable? Okay. So this is when you start inviting people, co-creating. What are you going to put in place here around the agreement structure when they say yes? Okay. What's the quality of that yes? And how do you know it's a high quality yes? So that accountability is built in. And this is where trust comes into play as well. When you start losing accountability, you've got a problem with trust. And then roles, okay? How do you link the roles that people are engaged in with what's going on? And then potential obstacles, okay? What are some areas of potential resistance? And then they usually will revolve around people, time, or money. And just kind of play with this a little bit. Again, there's no right answer on this. There's just an invitation to explore and to notice. And this worksheet, when we get to the 30-day challenge portion or the 30-day plan on this worksheet in particular will become very useful to you as you start actually looking for how do I make this happen in 30 days, sort of a thing.
And we'll use this worksheet becomes kind of a linchpin for our review tomorrow. So we'll come back to this worksheet to have this conversation, and then we'll do a recap on the week and bring it all together. But this is thank you for letting us go deep today. It's a lot of more Blaine and Dolan probably than anybody ever needs in one day. So thank you for letting us go deep on all this with you today. It was a lot of fun giving you this content. So we're at the promised time. So I'm gonna wish everybody a great rest of the day. Chad, do you have a question or anything?
Yeah, you haven't put the worksheet in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Let me try it again. Oh, you know why?
Yep.
Hang on. I sent it to an individual, not to everybody. My apologies.
Okay.
Thank you, Chad.
No problem. We
Thanks,
we want more of Dolan and Blaine here. So
Yeah,
there it is.
Well,
okay, it's in the chat.
it's
So we'll
like,
leave the room open here for just a minute so that you can download that. Okay, click on it and download it. And it will also appear in the LinkedIn room. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
in the LinkedIn room.
and a particular member of the group who will remain nameless, Tanya, I'll email this to you as well, Tanya. So you got it. You're good to go. My pleasure.
There you go.
All right,
Okay,
you guys. Thank you so much. Good day today.
Thanks, man.
All right. See you.
See
Thank
everybody
you.
tomorrow.
Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Take care.